Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The world of boarding school is always a complex one, especially for those who have not been there. They've only heard about it with their own series of traditions and rules and regulations that are at times unquestionable, but also doesn't really make sense if you have not studied in a boarding school or if you have not taught in a boarding school. Boarding schools emerged part of monastic order in England way back in 6th century. In fact, the King's College in Kent is the oldest surviving or rather running boarding school in the world. But you also have, of course, heard of much popular ones, Eton, Harrow, Millfield. All of them emerged as part of the monastic order, but it was only in about 17th century that boarding school could get rid of the church shackles and then develop in questions of science and rationality. In India, boarding schools emerged as a result of colonial expansion, pretty much, and some of the oldest boarding schools in India, of course, Lawrence School, Sanar, 1847, Woodstock School in 1854, roughly around that time, and then Mayo College, 1875, Bishop Cotton, Shimla, 1860s, and Doon came much later on. But to talk about all this and much more, we have guest speakers. First one is General Surendra Kulkarni, who is an alumnus of Mayo College, Ferguson College, Pune, and has served in the military for almost 40 years in various capacities. Of course, have been awarded the highest military civilian award in peacetime as well. He is the trustee of the Round Square. He is the founding member of a newly launched Boarding School Association of India and currently is the director of Mayo College since 2015. General Kulkarni, please. Our second panelist, Dr. Craig Cook, is a sociologist by profession, has worked in many schools and headed schools in the US, Philippines, and in Indonesia. Dr. Cook is currently the principal of iconic, one of the oldest boarding school up in Missouri, Woodstock School. Dr. Cook, please. Our third panelist is Captain Amarjyot Gyani Singh, or Captain A.J. Singh. He is popularly known as alumnus of Lawrence School, Sanar, National Defense Academy, and Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is a boarding school person by heart. In fact, he has never left boarding school. After leaving Sanar and serving in the army, he founded one of the most reputed boarding school in northern India, the Pine Grove School, where he's now serving as the executive director. He's also served as former chairperson of IPSC and is also the founding member of Boarding School Association of India. Captain Singh, please. So after we have questions for panelists, I will open the house for questions in last 10 minutes or so. My first question is to General Kulkarni. What advantages you see of boarding schools over day schools, especially in today's context?
Thank you, Rashid. In today's context, there is this idea that we must impart holistic education to our children. Beyond plain academics, we need to provide them adequate opportunities for co-curriculars, sports, collaborative activities, things like project-based learning, for which they need to be together. And this is only possible if they are staying in the same environment. In a city, if you're commuting, you can only do it once or twice a day. So you can't be there all the time. I understand that presently the examination system is individual oriented. The board exams are for one person alone. But collaboration is the key skill that we need, teamwork we need. And this is only possible if you're there together and working together. And that's only possible if you're part of a particular ecosystem, a campus, where all these things can happen, and they are time independent. It can happen in the morning, evening, night, inside the classroom, outside the classroom, on the play fields. But most important, they can go together beyond the campus and do things which are outside the curriculum. And all of us who are from boarding schools will be the first to claim that what we learned in the classroom was our schooling, what we learned outside the classroom was our education.
Thank you, General Kulkarni. If I could ask the same question to Captain Singh. Captain Singh, given the context that General Kulkarni spoke about, especially in terms of collaboration and learning off the field, how important do you think that is for today's generation?
Good morning, everybody. You see, when we look backwards at any kind of education which was started earlier also, it was the Gurukuls. The residential school environment, even the kings and queens of olden eras would want their children not to be, educated in the palaces, and would want them to go and live with good, great acharyas who would teach them the ways of life. Keeping any child at home has now become a culture because of the nuclear family. Otherwise, the parents, they say, are the first teachers, but they are not the greatest of teachers for their children because of the love and the bond between them. So they cannot actually impart great education to their children. So if you look at the greatest institutions even today in the world, whether it be Sandhurst, whether it be the National Defense Academy, whether it is Eton, Harrow, Doon, Mayo, Sinar, Woodstock, you name the best schools in the world, they're all residential in nature because of the opportunities to the children. Because today's world where children are so pampered and so micromanaged that they do not get the true education what is necessary. There are challenges, those we'll be talking about later, but we have to understand that letting go, even animals let go. The moment the umbilical cord is cut from the mother, the child is a child of God. It's no longer yours. But to hang on is something which is actually not in the great beneficial, it's not beneficial to the child in the future. So residential school has got a great purpose, a huge purpose, which only some people realize because the demand for the residential schools is not so high because of various reasons, but that is true education.
Thank you, Captain Singh. Dr. Cook, if I have to just take you back in time a bit, you have worked, of course, across different continents with different multicultural groups, and now you are heading Woodstock, which is an international school. So how do you see advantage of multiculturalism or international setup over, let's say, a national school or just, open to a particular nationality?
Yeah, thank you, Rashid. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. I think pivoting off of what the General said here about collaboration, right? This is one of the key outcomes that we look for in a boarding school setting. And particularly at Woodstock, our old tagline was educating for a world of difference. And I still like that very much because when I go around and talk to our alumni, graduates of boarding schools, they will talk about the value more than anything else of learning alongside people that were different from them. And so I think it creates an innovative space for the individual, the student, for the community to be able to engage in meaningful ways with difference. And I see the boarding school process, the socialization process, even in the dorms, we consider all of our resident staff, teachers as well. They're teaching at a different level, a very micro, on the ground level, and this really benefits our students, and having adults there that engage in some of those mediation processes, how to handle conflict, and how to resolve things in a healthy way. I think these are things that you don't get in a, as was mentioned before, a nuclear family context. So it's really important life skills in a sense that all boarding students are realizing.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. My second question to the panelists is largely about careers and placements in boarding schools. So my question, General Kulkarni, is that are boarding schools better placed than day schools, or place in itself to support college admissions and the college application process?
Well, I think when it comes to the college admission process, I don't think boarding schools are any better placed than day schools. Because if your whole aim of sending your child to school is to get him into a college, then of course there are other models which are as effective or even more so. But having gone through a boarding school, many universities I find are looking to see other qualities, other facets than mere academic excellence. They are looking at empathy, concern for the community, the ability to make an impact on society in later years. And therefore, if the story of the child through the boarding school reflects it, then I've seen, and it's our personal experience in our school, that those boys who have done things beyond academics, assuming that they would have done well in academics, definitely get better opportunities than those who are purely, mark earners. And I've often said that the purpose of K-12 education is not to reach K-13. And as long as that is the mindset, and unfortunately in India it's very strong, then I don't think the boarding schools have any edge over the other schooling systems.
Thank you. Capt. Singh, your thoughts on this?
See, I agree fully to what General Kulkarni has said. But I would say for sure that children from a boarding school are far better equipped to get better placement. Because of the opportunities they get, because of the various clubs they are attending, because of the various sports they are playing. It's, say, for example, in a day school, a child will get to learn one sport or maximum two sports. His exposure is there, and by the time he learns that he's not too good at that sport, it's too late. While in a boarding school, he's going to get the opportunity right from class 1. And many sports, many clubs, many opportunities. Even internationalism is so strong in boarding schools. Say, if you take a good boarding school, at least 20-25% of the children visit abroad for various things by the time they are 9th or 10th class. So they get a lot of exposure, and staying amongst themselves, they learn much better. They get social service opportunities, they get adventure opportunities, they get leadership opportunities, far, far more than what would a day school provide them. So accordingly, they are far better equipped, and hence, I would say that they stand a better chance of getting better placements than normal day school kids.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. General Kulkarni talked about engagement or engaging with community. And also, if you look at it, the kind of profile building that has to happen, especially if you want to get into good USA universities, it starts quite early in lots of school. So do you think, given that context, boarding school are better placed in terms of preparing students for college admissions?
Yeah, absolutely. Back to the holistic approach to a student, and we see that even in admissions practices and moving away from these standardized testing measures as kind of standalone measures. Boarding schools absolutely would play right into that movement. And again, to what Captain Singh said before, the whole issue with having leadership opportunities within a boarding context, right? There's so many internship opportunities. I feel like there are because it's a total institution. Students are there. They're away from their family, and so it really provokes an opportunity for most students to take up leadership roles, which is really going to serve them well as they move into university. I also am often found saying that we are not a test factory at Woodstock. And I say that openly and publicly because there's so much pressure about scores in this particular context. So we're about creating good citizens. We're about creating good leaders for the 21st century. And I think that's where that total immersion experience for boarding students is really going to serve them well and something their parents would be proud of.
So, Dr. Cook, I'm going to ask my next question to you, but if you can just stay with the fact that boarding schools are about holistic development, it's about empathy, it's about social work, and it's about connecting with the wider community, and of course leadership. So, do you think that the current decision of the government for centralized undergrad entrance exam, or what we call CUET, is going to actually benefit boarding school students, or is going to go against them? And if that is the case, how do you think schools as a whole, day or boarding school, should prepare students for it?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a challenge. What I think it will do is provoke schools, boarding schools, to really assess their identities, who they are. And it's kind of what I would call a dividing practice. In a sense, we have all these standardized movements. I've told our own community we've had two very hyper-rationalization processes going on during the pandemic. For us particularly, we moved to the IB just at the beginning of the pandemic. And on top of that, we went to online learning. And I find both of these, of course, having an external global curriculum that you're under, whether it's national or global in nature, plus online learning, which tends to be very rationalized in the spirit of Max Weber. And so how do you, as educators, bring the magic back to education? Because often, both for teachers and for students, these rationalization processes can kind of leave us feeling a little bit hollow, like if you're just looking at that test score. So I think it's going to provoke us, all these other pressures, constraints we're feeling from larger society, rationalizing these things, standardized. I think while they're good and necessary, at the same time, how do you keep the magic alive in education and in learning for students where it becomes magical still? So I think that's the dividing practice that should lead boarding schools to assess who they really are and what they're about in their true identity.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. General Kulkarni, if you look at the way CUET has been rolled out, there's still lots of glitches about it. The parents who are in panic, students don't know which college, university they are going to go to. The number of series of tests are still going on. So in that context, do you think it was or it is a good decision to implement a CUET?
See, conceptually, it's a good idea. But also conceptually, it must shift from being another aggregated test, which is currently being done, and moving towards an aptitude test. If you're going to just test the knowledge of the student, then the board result marks are already there for you to see. So it is just a test in another form today. So the entire testing system has to shift towards aptitude testing. That does the student have the aptitude for the undergraduate courses that he's seeking to take? Number one. Number two, the whole concept of standardized testing conflicts with another parallel concept that we run, which we say learning should become personalized. So you are in conflict fundamentally with this. The problem is because of the sheer numbers in India, universities don't have the time, resources and patience to individually interact with each student candidate before deciding this admission. So they look for some easy common benchmarks, and the moment you look for common benchmarks, there is always a dumbing down of any process, because you're not looking for that unique feature of that child which will bring value addition to your university.
Thank you. Captain Singh, do you think that schools now should they look beyond marks, and it's not just boarding schools are known to, of course, provide what we call all-round development and holistic education. But given the fact that now the government policies National Education Policy as well as the undergrad test, CUET. Now, looking at a more holistic approach to education, will that impact how students will look at their board exam marks? Will it take them away from the rote learning and concentrating too much just on one exam?
See, as far as CBSE is concerned, it is slowly going to move from the rote learning. They are very determined about it, and most probably this year itself, more than 1/4 of the paper is going to be out of the books. Now, this is the fear that if CBSE moves totally towards conceptual understanding of the subject and asks questions out of the book, are the scores going to be similar to what they were earlier or not? That is not going to happen. There are various boards which are not being able to follow with the same pace as what CBSE is wanting to do it. So there is a conflict. Are the marks going to be the same for X board compared to CBSE or Y board compared to CBSE? On what basis are they going to give the admissions later, coming down the line, 2 to 3 years, 4 years down the line? Are all the boards going to follow the same? No, not quick. It's still in experimental stages. Hence this centralized testing. If we remember, earlier it was just the AIEEE and the JEE, I think. Now it's become the JEE, and there are so many tests now coming. But when we talk of those tests and the boarding schools, they have been existing for a long time. Still, there are children in 11th and 12th because there are many professions which do not need this entrance tests. Many professions. Like say, you become an architect. Now there are some colleges taking a test for that too. Pilots, Merchant Navy, NDA. There are many which are not following the regular, the CUET or the AIEEE or the PMT or the various tests available. So, and then the last 2 years, what is most important is the last 2 years of education, this 11th and 12th. That is the most important part of school education. And here is where the coaching centers come in. And they play a huge role in enticing the child to pursue that tuition rather than education. And those people who are still going to be wanting their children to be educated are still going to be following the line of regular education, which I feel at present about 70% of the population is still like that, which is wanting the regular education, the wholesome education, the opportunities which are given in a school, rather than following the test examination pursuit. While there is about 30%, this is my reading, may be wrong, but this is my reading, about 30% are still pursuing the route of tuition. This is going to add to the route of tuition. As CLAT had come in, now this has come in, the CUET has come in, there are more exams. In fact, college is having its own exams now. There are so many exams for the children to give that it's going to be tough on the children. And we do hope, actually, there is some systemized methodology in where the board exams do have weight. If they do not have weight, yes, the children are going to follow the route of competitive examinations and tuitions.
Sure, why not? Yeah.
You know, in the context of admissions for boarding school children with some of the private universities in India, I've had long conversations and I came pretty close to closing the matter, but unfortunately it hasn't yet worked out. But this is a thought I want to leave with people who are here, whether from schools or even from universities if they are present here, that when universities interact with us, they come and talk about their universities in our school. They interact with their children. In some universities, we have an engagement from grade 9 onwards continuously. I've been telling university vice chancellors in my meetings with them that at the end of grade 11, with the 2 or 3 years of interaction you've had with that child, please make up your mind, is this child suitable for your university? And is the child happy to head for your university? In which case, please give him a conditional admission, not after class 12 or towards the end of class 12, but at the end of grade 11. Please give him a conditional admission, and if he doesn't meet the minimum benchmarks after that, well, bad luck to him. That way, this whole fear of what after class 12, this business of chasing exam after exam will get eased out. And because the current examination system, as I said, is individualized, we are highlighting the value of teamwork and collaboration, complex problem solving. You're not assessing the student for that when you give him a university admission, nor do the board exams cater for it. But this process, which I've been talking about, can lead to the happy solution, not for the masses, but definitely as far as boarding schools are concerned, or some of the other schools as well, even day schools. The universities can have this tie-up, and if the universities make their admission system a bit more flexible, and surprisingly, some of the good universities, I mean, at least both Ashoka and Jindal promised me that we are doing it, and then the pandemic came, and then we lost momentum. I hope I can revive this. But this is a thought I want to leave with all of you, that have close interaction between the universities and students over an extended period of time. Let them have a mutually suitable fit, and at the end of grade 11, you grant a conditional admission. It will take a lot of burden off the mind of a class 12 student, parents, etc. And then they would not hesitate to leave the child in a boarding school and benefit from all the other things that happen there.
Thank you, General Kulkarni. So I have a question for the audience. How many of you have studied in a boarding school? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So about 10 in the room. And how many of you are teaching or taught in a boarding school? So that's a huge number. Good. But if you look at literature, movies, boarding schools have been idolized, of course. They've made a villain in lots of movies. My favorite, of course, is Goodbye, Mr. Chips. I know how many have seen it, that. That's the iconic boarding school movie. And of course, in Indian movies, you have Tare Zameen Pe, you have Rockford. So there are lots of movies that have really captured the imagination of boarding life. So my next question to Captain Singh, given the fact that boarders were away for a larger part of last 2 years, now they have come back to the system. So what issues you are facing with them? Do you see a change? Are there issues that you're grappling with after they've stayed at home for a long time?
This, I think everybody will be facing the same issues. But luckily, we had very short closures. As far as our school is concerned, we were functional in all the 3 years. In fact, more than 400 kids were on, more than 400 people, in fact, 120 kids were continuously throughout even the pandemic, they were on campus. But majority went. Even though we opened last year very quickly, but still, after the Delta wave. But it's not our school alone. It's everywhere. It's day schools, it is boarding schools. All the children who have gone through this pandemic have suffered a lot in their learning experience and have also moved from wanting that mobile culture, getting on to just sitting at home and watching stuff on TV. It's, especially you talk about even yourself. If you start watching a movie every day, it becomes addictive. So you want to get to that evening at home where you want to watch the movie. It's similar with the kids. They have become now addictive to the screen. That is now painful when they come into a boarding school. Because it's not easy to get that much screen time while in school. And they are missing home, missing that screen time, missing the freedom, missing the ducking of the classes. So it is affecting their psyche. They are finding it difficult. But I would, again, if I put it on statistics, it's about 10% who are finding it difficult. But 90% of them are now back on grid. They are still, their social interactions have definitely reduced, but they have bounced back. Many of them, most of them, I would feel, have bounced back. But it's going to be some time more before actually things normalize. But it will come back. I'm very hopeful that it will come back.
Dr. Cook, what issues you are facing in your school? Of course, your school is more multicultural, lots of international students. How it has shaped up your post-pandemic operations and the issues that is associated with it?
Yeah, certainly. Our diversity has definitely taken an impact during the pandemic within our student population. We've seen less diversity, so we're working on that. That's probably one of our key goals as we look forward. I think the issue, everybody is very excited to be back on campus, and yet at the same time, our students are, as Captain Singh said, they're bouncing back, they're resilient, they're getting used to that, yet they're still online for quite a bit of time. So I think our challenge is how to engage them in some meaningful online activity while everybody is still, still very happy to be in a face-to-face context. If we're really trying to prepare them for university, most of them are going to be having at least one online class a semester, I would say, having been in higher ed for a lot of years. And so how do you prepare them for that in meaningful ways, and how do you get them online in productive ways? And that's actually one of our challenges with parents, of course, because they are sending their kids to have that face-to-face experience in a remote area of a boarding school. And so being persuasive with our parent community is one of those challenges with, it's a both-and world that we're living in. Yes, we're trying to maximize our outdoors, leveraging our environment as much as we can, but at the same time, how do you keep students engaged in the digital world in a productive kind of manner, which is very important for their own learning, because as digital natives, that's how they are learning. So those are some of the things that we're facing. And what does a boarding school look like in a hybrid learning model? I think that's the question, because all these other learning institutions are in very much a hybrid mode, but what are the implications for a boarding school culture in that way? I think that's the question we have to answer going forward.
Thank you. General Kulkarni, what are your thoughts on this?
See, on one hand, there was learning loss, which is common to all. On the other hand, let me tell you, both children and parents were extremely keen to see the boys getting back to the boarding school. It's not just the kids. Kids were very happy to come back. Even the parents were very happy to see the last of them. Because beyond the point, all living in a closed environment, they were getting at each other's nerves. The major problem was, well beyond this loss of learning, was the narrative that was spread out at the start of the pandemic, and I'm sorry to say, our own education fraternity fell for it, saying that schools are closed. The campuses were closed, but the schools were open. And had we pressed that narrative home with parents, I think we would have had lesser problems today. We ourselves were tom-tomming the idea that school is closed. None of our schools were closed. We didn't allow people to come to the campus, that's all. So why did we make such a hullabaloo about it? Having made that hullabaloo, now we are in, disaster management mode. And therefore, mainly, there is a tendency for children in boarding schools, because of communication today, to reach out to parents for what would have been minor irritants, minor aggravations, which they would have happily resolved amongst their mates. And once the parents step into the process, even if the kids get back to being what they were, parents are less likely to, number one. And number two, they will put it in their social media groups, which will further aggravate the problem. And therefore, a great amount of patience is needed. But educating the parents on the smooth return of children back to normal boarding school life is should be the single biggest focal point, and not worry that much about the children themselves.
Thank you, General Kulkarni. So that brings me to the last question of the day. With the opportunities, we do have challenges. And I'm assuming that for the boarding fraternity of both students and teachers, the challenges in the coming years are going to be manifold. So what are the challenges that you see, Captain Singh, for the boarding schools in the coming years?
This question is very huge. It can't be answered so quickly. But whether the challenges are towards admissions,
Sorry for
or whether
interrupting my close friend. It's a big question, needs answering. Please come back for IC3 next year again.
yes. No, it can't be answered in a short time. But whether the challenges are towards, state or government policies, whether the challenges are towards demand, whether the challenges are towards what we are providing, whether the challenges are towards what the requirement is, whether the challenges are towards the program itself, how are we reinventing ourselves as boarding schools, that itself, how are we making ourselves more meaningful to the changed culture as far as parent and family culture is concerned, or the needs and demands. It is very, very challenging. Even though we feel that we, as far as provision is concerned, whether it be faculty to student, whether it be land to child, whether it be area, campuses, facilities, opportunities vis-a-vis to child in ratio proportion, we are fantastic. But are we making ourselves competent enough to be in demand? If we look at it truthfully, the demand is reducing across the board for boarding schools, across the country. This is what I feel. I don't know. I've been now with a boarding school for 35 years. The others may also feel the same. The number of applicants coming, the application, I'm not talking of COVID alone. Because during COVID, yes, there was, in 1921, there was a huge dip, but it's bounced back. There's huge demand back again this year. But is it the same as 10 years ago or 8 years ago? I don't think so. And the total boarding school, I think number of children wanting admission in boarding schools will not be more than, I think, 50,000 in the whole country. I don't think so. There may not be more than 25,000 parents, aspiring parents in North India. Now, are we making ourselves meaningful? Because what he said, Rashid very nicely said, there are movies, there's a feeling, and that feeling is children are being, pulled away from parents. They are not, they become detached, what you say. Then the feeling is that children may be bullied. Then the feeling is that children will be very uncomfortable in being alone. We send them for independence, but will they be uncomfortable? And then they talk of drug abuse, they talk of smoking, they talk of drinking, they talk of other types of habits which will, as if it's not happening outside, as if they are able to control it at home. That is not the question. The question is the branding, the feeling among people. That has to change, because I can vouch for it, that in a boarding school, substance abuse or drinking or smoking, etc., is far, far, far less than what it is outside. Far less. The instances compared to day schools. But are we able to project that? No. So the challenges are immense, and how we make our USP to really become meaningful. Also, the feelings of, say, we've been in boarding. So that punishment, power, privilege, state used to be there of prefects and masters. And so the feeling is still there that children get beaten, they get punished. The psyche says that. It doesn't happen no more. But are we able to establish it? That now is the world of, it's a boarding school of care, compassion, love, affection. It's a shout-free environment. It's a very, very wonderful environment for a child to be brought up in, and far, far better than staying at home. Are we able to project that? That's a huge challenge for us. And we need to address it. Because we are better than the day schools or the educational system of a day school. The boarding school is far, far better. But are we able to get the trained staff for that? We all see it here. Very few have lived in a boarding school, but many are teaching in a boarding school. Are we able to train our teachers today to really do the care and affection, what is actually required? Because every teacher wants to do that 2 o'clock and then get home, even though they are taking the facility of the residents in the boarding school. They want to get home. They don't want anything to do with sport, interaction with children, tuition, tutorial classes. They want to evade them. So it's the training which is so important. For us to train our teachers who come to us, and they have not been in a boarding. So they don't know what is the boarding school culture. So there are, I'll leave it to General Kulkarni to carry on, because there are immense challenges, and our USPs need to be strong, and we need to be able to project it so that the demand remains, so that maximum children can benefit from such an environment.
Thank you, Captain Singh. General Kulkarni, 2 challenges.
Parents. I mean, that's serious. It's not in a lighter vein. But apart from that, and AJ's covered a lot of ground. He's left 1 or 2 residual points which he's allowed me to speak on. The problem is, when the film roll camera has given way to the digital camera, the world has moved beyond us. So Kodak got wiped out. If the boarding schools don't, as he said, reinvent themselves, they are also going to get wiped out. Earlier, the challenge was that people in transferable jobs, or who are from, say, as he said, from that monastic, hereditary, religious stream, went to such schools. Then those who were on transferable jobs and could not find schools in remote areas of the country, send them to boarding schools so that the kids would be stable at one place. Today, you can have a large number of excellent schools even in tier 2 and 3 towns. But yet, why do we get children from there? We get children from there because they understand that they cannot provide their child in their tier 2 and tier 3 towns what can be provided in a good boarding school. And I'd like to repeat something I said in Bombay a few years ago. I said, Mr. Mukesh Ambani, and we were pretty close to his house that event, I said he can afford to buy off my school and 20 other boarding schools at a drop of a hat. But at walking distance, he cannot provide his 3 children the facilities that we provide our children. I said, that is the crux of the matter, which he would like to provide his children. Now the point is that we are badly in need in repositioning ourselves in a changed market. If we keep selling ourselves for the virtues that were there when we were in school, in boarding school, or where our seniors were in boarding school, and we emphasize those issues, then we are rapidly going to vanish from the face of the earth. The other thing to understand is there's a feeling that boarding schools are extremely expensive. Let me tell you, we did a survey last year just to understand whether our fee structure is at the right place or not. And we found that at least 5 lakh people in India would be willing, not willing to pay, not willing to send the boarding school, but willing to pay fees between 10 to 15 lakhs a year. 5 lakh people in India are willing to pay that much fees for good education in India. It doesn't translate into sending that many children to boarding school. Please understand that. The question is, therefore, this window is there. How do we manage to grab that space and that attention and that mind space? And I think this is a great initiative which our chairman, Dr. Sumer and Rashid and others, the initiative they've taken to set up this Boarding Schools Association of India is to within the boarding schools itself, educate people on how to highlight our true values and what offering we have to give, number one. And number two, to educate the larger population on what are the relevance and our ability to be agile. You know, he spoke about this King's School in Canterbury. I just happened to be there end of June. They are 1,500 years or 1,700 years old. But they are relevant. Please go and visit the school. They have been reinventing themselves every 20, 25 years. Now time has come to reinvent every 10 years if need be. And if we reinvent ourselves and come to the cutting edge of where education, pedagogy and all is concerned, then the facilities and opportunities that a boarding school provides is completely unmatched in any other sector anywhere.
Thank you. On that note, I think we're running a bit out of time. We have about 5 minutes left, so we will be able to take 2-3 questions from the audience. Do we have any questions? That's quite a few. Hi. So, okay, so the lady in white.
Morning, everyone. So, with August Fabulous, I'd just like to ask you, what are the boarding schools doing for the mental health of the adolescents in this?
So, Dr. Cook, you want to take that question?
Thank you for the question. What are boarding schools doing in regard to mental health of students? Right, this is a huge challenge. It's a centerpiece, I think, of what any boarding school is looking at today. We're adding more staff, residential life staff. We're adding more counseling staff. We're addressing this in our co-curricular activities, in our curricular activities. All these things are strategies to help students cope with this. Again, there's a lot of strain. There's a lot of relearning of culture being for our student population, most of them being home for 2.5 years. And so these are challenges. And also, I would say, include staff in that realm as well. We have to do a better job of providing a holistic environment that's healthy for our staff. Boarding schools can be all-consuming. They're total institutions. They're a complete ecosystem. And if we're not also helping our staff as well, because their tanks have to be full emotionally, in a sense, in order to help students be in that same position. So those are things I think that are relevant.
I'll just tell you one simple thing. The biggest problem of mental health of students today is expectations. There's far too much of expectation from the school itself, because everybody wants to put out that full-page ad about the toppers of your school. The parents want every guy to become the next Einstein or Steve Jobs. So you're just putting expectations on those kids. And I mean, one of the conferences I had a tagline. I said, my biggest concern is that we are stealing the childhood from a child. So if you lower expectations, honestly, I mean, not symbolically, I think a lot of things will just get better. That's all.
Thank you. Gentleman in black. So, the lady in white and then gentleman in black.
It's not so much a question, but a statistic. And the question was asked, what's the biggest challenge? General Kulkarni, you were there at that conference in Jaipur. When they spoke, not just for boarding schools, but for schools in general, the biggest threat is the number of students are dwindling. The population between 0 and 19 years of age was 40.9% in 2011. It's come down to 34% now, and another decade, the population of that age group is going down to 25.2%. If parents aren't having children, or there's a lot of live-in relationships where they're not willing to have children, So what are schools going to do? And then it came down to the age of 5 to 19, where it's believed that by 2040, that percentage is going to come down to minus 18%. So we have to think about this seriously. And there was a joke that went around schools. Well, India is an aging population. That's a worry. And someone joked and said we have to transform our schools into old age homes maybe. Think of a plan. And another thing to share about CUET, there was a discussion yesterday where Sayam Bharadwaj was there from the CBSE. And he clarified that he has written to, they are having discussions with the board in Cambridge to give the CBSE exam all the importance, where our students don't have to appear for the IELTS exam or for the TOEFL for that matter. And for the CUET, someone asked if all importance is going to be given to the CUET, and what is the credibility of the CBSE exam? And he assured that a percentage of the CBSE exam is going to be calculated towards the CUET grading. So that was a commitment from Mr. Bharadwaj.
Thank you. So I have a question. We have the president of the Boarding School Association of India, Dr. Sumer Singh, with us. And Dr. Sumer Singh has lived all his life in boarding school, studied at Doon School, then went on to study at St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and then taught at Doon School, and then headed Lawrence School, Sanar, and also Delhi College, Indore, for a number of years. So Dr. Sumer Singh, what are the aim and objective of Boarding Schools Association of India? Do you think that some of the challenges that the panelists have talked about is something that you'd keep in mind while addressing the pathways or the action plan for BSAI?
Thank you for that question, Rashid. Yes, I think this association has brought members together of boarding schools to share best practices and to provide opportunities of training heads, teachers, housemasters, matrons on the various aspects of a boarding school. Pastoral care is obviously an important part of it, but also a spirit of adventure, a spirit of service. All those kind of things need to be brought into the curriculum, not just the academic side. So it is to share amongst ourselves, and we have associated with the Boarding Schools Association of Great Britain, so that we can further share the ideas back and forth. There's nothing really other than that is not the essence of this organization. We welcome every single boarding school. We don't, if it's a pure boarding school, we don't say no to its membership. And we want to help this grow. But I would also like to add one thing, since you mentioned that I've been in boarding school all my life. From the age of 7 when I went to Welham Prep School, I think one of the great opportunities of a boarding school is equalization and secularism. We had no idea in our school who was rich, who was poor, whose father was powerful, whose father was, the kid was on a scholarship. No idea at all. It was a total case of everyone is equal. We had to wear a uniform. We could not bring an expensive watch to school. We could not, I mean, it was a case of you prove who you are, don't tell us about who your father is. That was the first lesson that I think came out of it. The second was that you're rubbing shoulders and sleeping in dormitories with people of the entire geographical region of India, of all religions. So it is a kind of a, it imbibes in me a sense of secularism which I cannot get from anywhere else unless maybe in the Indian Army. So this is another aspect of it. More importantly, I can talk to the Prime Minister of India or to a person who is cleaning my car exactly equally without any kind of hesitation of how important or how not important he is. In the same way, I can go and live very comfortably in a 7-star hotel. I can equally comfortably live in a tent in the wilderness. This is all the kind of experiences that one gets out of a boarding school, gives you this kind of a build-up of confidence and eventually of leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. On that note, we will conclude. May I thank all the audience for your patience and your humor, and the panelists, Dr. Cook, General Kulkarni, and Captain Singh. Thank you for being here.